Hello, I'm Becca. I am the product designer for Secure, under the Secure umbrella. I've been the product designer for static analysis. Just as a reminder, I'm moving to vulnerability management in 14.3, but all of the groups under Secure are very much collaborative. And so we'll continue to work on this feature that I am about to show you. So we're going to talk about MR inline findings and security vulnerabilities in the context of the code that's introducing them. So a little bit of a persona remix. Secure tends to focus on Sam, the security analyst, who's primarily responsible for keeping sensitive applications safe. For this feature, we're focusing on Sasha, the software developer, and helping him review security vulnerabilities that his code introduced. Why are we doing this? A few reasons. One, security analysts need help. It's unrealistic to expect security to triage all vulnerabilities on their own that every developer across the org is introducing. Also consider that smaller and even medium-sized teams probably don't even have a dedicated security person, let alone team. I'll get into all of that a little bit more in a second. The second reason why we're focusing on Sasha, the software developer, is developers understand the importance of writing secure code, but their workflows aren't being supported currently. So I've spoken with a lot of developers over the last month and have learned that they are happy to triage vulnerabilities. They would love to write, secure code as long as it's their code that is introducing the vulnerabilities, not someone else on their team. And right now, with the current implementation, there are vulnerabilities being reported in the MR that developer isn't necessarily introducing with that MR. So that's kind of a back-end data quality issue that's being addressed on the side. But B, they can get support along the way. If they can get support along the way, that will make them a lot more likely to triage vulnerabilities if they know what they're doing and how to handle them. And C, if they don't have to go out of their way to do it. They are also more likely to integrate security and secure practices into their workflow. So I just want to get into security analysts need help a little bit more. I'm going to spend the next couple of slides talking about the problem, because I think it's really, really important to understand this before we get into the solution. So on security analysts need help. This is from a LinkedIn course that I recently completed called DevSecOps, Building a Secure Continuous Delivery, excuse me. And this was a slide in it, but this message is communicated through several articles. I've linked some below in the comments, but it's very typical to see a ratio like this. You have about 100 developers to 10 operations people to 1 security person. So what does that look like in practice? All of these developers are creating MRs. They may be introducing 1 vulnerability here, 8 there, 12 over there, and that can equate to hundreds or even thousands of vulnerabilities that need to be triaged every week by this 1 person. It's not sustainable. So what happens? Devs start to see security as a blocker. So you have this 1 security person saying, no merge until I make sure it's safe. And then you have these developers saying, oh, it's just a small bug fix. I've been waiting 3 days already. Or come on, dude, it's the last day of the milestone. I need to get this feature shipped. Like, please just approve it for now. Like, I'm sure it's fine. I'm sure there's no risk. And maybe you have an engineering manager saying, that poor security person, I wish my team was better equipped to help. So let's look a little bit more closely at the developer workflows that aren't being supported. So this is a typical developer workflow for shipping code. A developer writes code locally. They then push to GitLab and create an MR. They review the proposed changes in the MR and then request reviews and approvals. Conversations, collaboration happen from there. Often there's changes to the code. They may, run another pipeline and then will resolve threads, errors, conflicts, review job findings, and anything that may be blocking the merge. If there are any policies set, as Annabelle covered, that could be blocking the merge, those have to be handled before the merge can proceed. And then finally, you get to merging. So it's this step where ideally developers would review their own security findings, and looking at the results from the security jobs that have run. But do they? No, they don't. Well, why not? So there's a few reasons why they don't. But for the sake of brevity and to keep it in context of the feature proposal ahead, we're focused on solving the following two problems. Excuse me, one second. So the first is that devs need support along the way, and our workflows don't provide this yet. So devs will sometimes need to collaborate with other developers or the security person or team if they're unable to triage the vulnerability on their own. And then two, our workflows require an added manual step of going to the security widget to review vulnerabilities. In other words, devs have to go out of their way and interrupt their preferred workflow to do this. So on the right here is a screenshot of our current secure widget in the MR. And different companies may have different policies as to which severity vulnerabilities need to be triaged before proceeding with the MR. We currently have a vulnerability check, as Annabelle also mentioned, that can be enabled on a project that will block an MR from proceeding if there are critical, high, or unknown severity vulnerabilities that have been detected as part of those secure jobs that ran in the pipeline. So currently, a developer would have to come into this security widget, which is currently divided by scan type. So you have SAST at the top here, dependency scanning, container scanning, and so forth. And they would have to look at the criticals under each category, then the highs, and then the unknowns, which are actually at the bottom underneath medium, low, and info severities. So it's very manual. If you click on these vulnerabilities, a modal pops up and there's not really a workflow in there. You can create an issue from there, or you can dismiss it. But in terms of collaborating on that vulnerability, pinging a person on the security team or another developer, that workflow is just not there yet. And this is no fault to anyone on the secure team. Secure is a fairly new stage. It's been around for 2 or 3 years, and the focus initially was on breadth versus depth. And so now what we're starting to see is more depth and building out the quality of these features rather than just a wider feature set. So this is really exciting because we can start to make these things better. So the feature idea that we had to address these problems is inline findings in the MR diff. Let me just take a look at the time. Okay, 8 minutes. Lots to cover in 8 minutes. So I will go over this at a high level. These are the steps that I've taken so far as part of this initiative. It started with syncing and collaborating with the code quality team, which has since moved under static analysis. But the code quality team did, before they moved under static analysis, they did a lot of great work with being able to, on the back end, show findings inline in the MR diff. So we were able to kind of use the work that they did and just focus on more of like the front end, more of the UX, because they did so much great back end work. So after syncing with them, I did a competitive analysis. There's a screenshot of it in the top right there, and there's a mural link below. Also did some design explorations, review with other designers, cross-stage product managers, incorporated the feedback from those reviews into the designs. Then I did solution validation on V1 of the design explorations I came up with. I wrote a research script and chatted with 9 developers or 7 developers, I think 2 security engineers internally here at GitLab, synthesized and shared those insights, and then took the feedback and the learnings from V1 solution validation, and am currently in V2 of solution validation. So with the 6 minutes I have left here, these were some of the insights that came from solution validation V1. The most important thing here is that 9 out of 9 participants found inline findings helpful, which really surprised me because there is this attitude of security is just a blocker. So I was not expecting all of the developers that I spoke with to say, this is awesome, this is helpful, I would definitely review these vulnerabilities, and this is something that will make me feel like I'm writing more secure code. So I was really actually shocked at how accepted it was. And not only that, people were very excited about it, and then got some other really great feedback. They found the interaction of expanding and collapsing the vulnerabilities intuitive. And that was largely because I'm using kind of pre-established patterns that we already have. So I'm going to show you the prototype, but feel free to go through these insights. I also put some notable quotes in here that came out of those conversations. You can see at the bottom here, general feedback on the prototype. To see this inline in the code would be incredibly helpful. I think it's a good feature because I spent a lot of time looking at the changes tab, and the more info I can glean without it impeding my review, the better. And you can clearly point and say, this line is introducing vulns, let's have a discussion. So now to quickly go over the version 2 prototype that I'm currently testing. So this is essentially what this will look like. Well, we need to do more validation, but this is where we are so far. So just to review, if a developer or security analyst wants to review vulnerabilities, they have to come down to the security widget, which gives kind of an overview of how many critical, how many high. They would expand this section, and as I mentioned before, have to come in here, look at the criticals, look at the highs, look at the unknowns maybe, and go from there. It's not very intuitive. So what we're looking at here is in the changes tab, what if we introduce kind of using this, how it says 11 unresolved threads. What if we do something similar at the top here that says how many inline findings there are? So maybe there is an icon here that says, okay, that should say 3, but 3 inline security findings, and then 1 inline code quality finding. Something I won't get into right now is that code quality is, because even though it's moving under static analysis because it works like a static analysis scanner, the feedback that I got from developers was they are separate, and I don't see code quality as a security finding. So that's been a little bit tricky for me to try to incorporate code quality in this view, but also keep them separate. So I'm still kind of working out how exactly we're going to do this, but this was one idea that I had, to separate them out like this. And then right next to it, it says showing 4 findings. I thought it was important to say how many findings were being shown, because if you come down into the settings menu, you can set filters here. So I wanted to show that there may be filters applied that aren't showing all of the available inline findings. Something else I've gotten really great feedback on is you can toggle this on, and it shows only the blockers. So if there is that vulnerability check policy set, it would automatically apply those critical high and unknowns for example, and people seem very excited about this so far. And then as you can see, it went from showing 4 findings down to 3. And then, okay, I'm gonna go really quickly here. So there are these severity icons in the gutter here. You can click and it expands these. You can click on these one by one to get more of the details. You can also leave a comment here as you would in any line of the code. If you wanna bring in other people and have a conversation. Something else that came out of V1 was the need to jump to the next. I heard that from a lot of people that they would want to be able to jump to the next because they don't want to have to scroll and look for those icons. So if you click on this jump to the next, it's going to automatically open the first one. And from here, you can change the status of the vulnerability. You can add a comment or you can create a separate issue. I'm running out of time very quickly. So if we just keep jumping to the next, this is something that I am still looking for feedback on, because the challenge here is how do we communicate that not all security findings can be shown in line. So for SAST, we can say it's this line of code that introduced this, but for something like DAST, which scans the entire URL, we're unable to do that. So I've been playing around with some ideas of how can we let people know that there are more vulnerabilities that they might need to look at. And there is an open issue that we're still experimenting with about adding a security tab and maybe letting people jump over to that to look at the remainder of the vulnerabilities. So in the 0 seconds I have left, upcoming updates, I'm looking at repurposing the copy link button to create a link to each inline vulnerability so they can be individually referenced in the comments. Adding a step before viewing the status dropdown. I've received some feedback that going straight to having that dropdown doesn't feel like a state of completion. So I may add a button here to change status. And then if you click that, then it would turn the status into a dropdown. And then removing the synopsis of other vulnerabilities at the end altogether, because while an implementation such as that might be helpful in a security review context, it would be out of place in other use cases of the changes tab, like just reviewing code changes or comments. And then trying to communicate that only some vulnerabilities can be shown in line. So in here, I have remaining questions and considerations, both in scope and out of scope. And that's all that I have. I have many links in the UX Showcase agenda and in the comment section of these slides. If you have any questions or feedback, feel free to reach out or comment in the issue that I posted the link for in the agenda.